Are you an established small business owner or aspiring entrepreneur? Would you like professional advice to help your business grow and succeed? Well, look no further. The Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center is the territory's #1 resource to move your business forward. Enjoy no-cost advising, low-cost training, and technical assistance from experts in both the public and private sectors. The VISBDC is nationally accredited and sustained by the University of the Virgin Islands and the U.S. Small Business Administration. Visit us at our locations on St. Thomas, St. John, or St. Croix, and follow us on social media at VISBDC. For easy access to all our training and networking events, be sure to join our newsletter and download the VISBDC app. The Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center, here to help your business start, grow, and succeed.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Greetings on behalf of the VISBDC Network. We welcome you to the More Than a Sale, Strategies for Building and Retaining a Loyal Customer Base webinar. It costs more to find a new customer than to keep an existing one. This webinar will focus on customer relationship management strategies that build trust and loyalty. Learn how to turn one-time buyers into lifelong advocates through excellent service, effective communication, and a focus on customer experience. Today's presenter is Mr. Langley Shazar, and he will formally introduce himself. So let me switch and let everyone know that please place your questions in the chat and they will be answered by the presenting team either directly in the chat or later during a question and answer segment. A copy of today's presentation will be attached to the post-survey email sent after this live session. We encourage you to take a few minutes after today's webinar and fill out that survey that lets us know how we're doing. So our presenter, Mr. Shazar, is going to go ahead and start sharing his screen. And so with that being done, we see your screen. I'll go ahead and I'll hand it over to you. So without further ado, Mr. Shazar, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, everyone. Mr. Industrious, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be here. I recognize some of the names that were coming in, so thank you guys for your continued support of not only the SBDC, but of myself as a presenter and some of the topics that we've been covering over the last couple of years. It's been certainly a privilege to have been welcomed back so many times to SBDC, and hopefully you are taking this information and being able to apply it to help your business or even your agency or your division department continue to grow and improve. So briefly about me, I am kind of aware of all hats is what I'll say. So of course we do the public speaking. I also do public policy consulting and the creative strategy consulting outside of my 9 to 5, which is project management here at the Bureau of Information Technology, or BIT. So it's a unique conversation for us to have today because we'll talk about the human aspect. And many of you who have been on, or this is your first time joining one of my presentations, all the things that we discuss, I come from a very human-centered perspective because that's the area that we have been missing the mark when it comes to leadership, when it comes to customer service, and of course, customer relations, as we'll talk about today, is about the human aspect. We think that we have all these tools and we have all this technology, and now with the introduction of AI, that we don't need people or we don't need to be personable, and that is simply not the case. So we're going to talk a lot about that because I am on the forefront of the technological edge for the government. And even in my personal time, I use technology in a myriad of ways, but we can't let the technology override the need or the importance of still being people and still being sociable, still being professional. So we're going to jump right into the conversation today. And the agenda looks like there's a lot here, but I promise you it'll go by much faster than you realize. We'll talk about the relationships. We'll spend quite a bit of time there. Miss Industrious mentioned the cost associated with retention versus acquisition, and we'll touch on that briefly. And then we'll get further into understanding the importance of working with people. And we'll look at some different tools. We'll look at some different methodologies, and we'll look at some different concepts. Now, I'm not going to refer any type of software, any type of app, or any type of tool to you. You're going to have to figure out what you believe that you need in terms of a technological edge or advantage. But we will talk about some of the ways that you can determine what type of tool you believe that you need for building your customer base and your customer retention. So I see some things happening in the chat. Do we have questions before we even get started? I don't mind to go ahead and answer anything right now.
We don't have any questions, just everyone giving their morning greetings.
Ah, terrific. Thank you. All right, well, we'll continue to go right ahead. So everything is about relationships. And one of the things that we have to bear in mind, especially in the territory, and I'm going to try and keep this very, very VI specific because we are so reliant on tourism, which is founded in our ability to be able to work with the public in a myriad of capacities. And so it's about building that relationship. And so we might be thinking that, well, these are tourists, they'll never come here again. But we do have repeat tourists. But I think we also need to be very aware that the world is much smaller than we realize now, thanks to social media and the technology that we can leverage to improve our position in our marketplace. People are talking about the Virgin Islands, good and bad. I see people that I follow on social media, big time influencers, and all of a sudden they're going live and they're like, "Hey, I'm here in the Virgin Islands. I'm here at this restaurant. I'm here," and you're like, "Wow, these are almost celebrity status individuals in the social media world, and they're coming here, they're traveling here, and they're giving their feedback, and they're talking about their experiences, and they're talking about what are good and bad when they come and visit." And this is going to be something that we all have to be aware of, because it could be your business they frequent, it could be your restaurant, it could be something that ends up being part of your environment or your ecosystem. Maybe you just provide a service. Maybe you provide a service to someone who provides a service to the public. So there's a couple of ways that we can look at that, but know that this is going to touch everyone. And so for anybody in the room who is trying to build their business or trying to enhance their business, or maybe you're still trying to start a business, being able to build relationships, not only professionally with others in your space. We've talked extensively about your team and building a relationship with your team and with all the people that you'll be managing or people you're bringing on board or collaborating with. But it's equally important to understand that you've got to build relationships with your client base. We talked about that in the customer service aspect just earlier this year. And when we look at beyond customer service to customer relationship management, this is where you have to begin to really take the strides and the steps forward to understand what your customers are looking for. Many times we think that we know what the customers want because we're starting a business, and typically you start a business because you're trying to solve an issue, you're trying to solve a problem, and that problem is something that you've probably experienced yourself. But once you get into the business aspect, you begin to realize that maybe the market has shifted, maybe the environment has changed, maybe people's needs, desires, and wants have changed. And so you have to always keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening. So I want to ask anybody in the room, and this is not anything you have to put in the chat unless you feel so led, but this is more for you to be thinking about and even to write down. And if you have a customer, and remember, as we talked about in the customer service presentation, that if you don't particularly provide a outward facing service, maybe you're not in retail, maybe you're not in the restaurant, maybe you're not in hospitality, maybe you do work for the government, there's still a client or a customer. You serve someone in some capacity, whether you are working with people and have direct reports, those are customers. If you are in a leadership position, your team, those are customers. If you do, in fact, work with the public, of course, those are going to be clients and customers. So think about your most loyal customers, people who always come back to you. So maybe you don't provide something they purchase, but maybe you provide a service that they need. Perhaps they come back to you in particular for everything that they need, and they don't want to go to Sally Joe, or they don't want to go to Jim Bob. They want to come and see you to fix their problems. Think about what creates that relationship and what makes them loyal. And again, you don't have to put this in the chat, but just be something to be thinking about, because this is going to frame how you build upon creating those relationships and being able to benefit from the repeat service and interaction that will continue to bolster not only your reputation as a professional and personally, but also the reputation and the brand of whatever it is that you do or whomever it is that you work for. Anybody have any questions about the relationship aspect of this before we go into retention versus acquisition? Any questions?
Sorry, I don't see any questions as yet.
Okay, terrific. Well, we'll just continue right on. One of the things that I found fascinating when I was doing some research on this topic, especially, was the fact that Forbes said it costs 5 times more to acquire a new customer than to keep an existing one. And so if you look at that in hard numbers, you're looking at the fact that it's going to cost more in marketing, more in energy, more in effort, more in time to try and bring new business in. Now, this is not to say it's a one or the other. We're not saying you forego not bringing in new business, because obviously you expand by bringing in new business, by bringing in new customers. However, that's going to require a significant amount of energy expenditure versus making sure that you maintain that solid customer base and that return on investment. You might be thinking, well, why would we put so much effort into keeping customers? And it is the repeat return concept is what's going to sustain you over time. So if you have a customer, you have a series of customers, and those people come in, you see them one time, and that's it. They may have been a very large purchase. Maybe they are tourists, for example. We'll use the retail market, and they come in and they spend $500 worth of goods, and they get clothes or whatnot. You're thinking, man, that's fantastic, but that's not your everyday. That doesn't happen all the time. And even a cruise ship or multiple cruise ships coming in do not equate to you making that kind of sale all the time. But what you do end up having is that person who really likes your service, really likes the atmosphere of your store, and comes in every payday and picks something up. So this person is spending $4,000 or $5,000 per se over the course of a year, as opposed to the one person who spent $500. And so if you have multiple people who are coming in and spending that money frequently, that return on investment is exponentially higher than just the one-off people. And so we have to stop looking at growth. And we've said this before, we have to stop looking at growth as something that can only happen with the big win and the big expenditure and the big purchase, right? Your growth happens over time with people who are going to continue to be a patron of your business. And we've talked a lot about customer service, and you guys can refer back to that, but it is the relationship that allows you to build that loyal customer base. Who can think about the sites that you use online? Many of us shop online, especially because we have to order a lot of things to come to the territory. I shop online all the time. And one of the things that is an immediate turnoff for me is if I go to a website and I've got stuff in my cart, I'm ready to pull the trigger, and all of a sudden they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we don't ship to you." Now, of course, I think we all have options to ship to the States and have it shipped to us, whether by family members or some other service, but it's a hassle and it's annoying, to say the least. For me, if I'm shopping on your site and you say, "Oh, we don't ship to you," guess what I'm not doing? I'm not shopping there. Furthermore, there are people who offer certain services, Afterpay and some different types of services. There were a couple of websites that I would frequent that offered these services so I could do stuff for my family and my kids. And I went on the website one day. Oh, we no longer support Afterpay. We no longer support Affirm. I said, well, I appreciate that. I'm never shopping there again, right? Because those are things that I needed in order for me to be able to work within my budget and my means. And the reason I say all that is because you have to understand your customer base and you have to understand what your people need. This goes back to building that relationship so that you can really dial in what the services are. We'll talk here in a little while about the need for feedback. And we've talked about that from a leadership perspective as well as a customer service perspective. It's going to be important in your relationship and management model that you get feedback. If people are not pleased with something, if people are looking for something else and you can provide it. Now, this is not to go outside the scope of your operations, but if you can provide it, then you need to be paying attention so that you keep that customer coming back. Right? And this is the thing, customer importance, word of mouth and community recommendations. How many people, and I can't see anybody's hands, of course, but you can just kind of nod your heads and be thinking about how often we've said, man, you know what? Have you ever been to this restaurant? Have you ever been to this store? And you ask your friends, you ask your contemporaries, you ask your counterparts, and they're like, nah, I wouldn't do that. No, I wouldn't go there. No, the food's this. Or there's some sort of review they give you that makes you question whether or not you want to go there. Most of the time we don't. So not only is the recommendation important, but the word of mouth is the best and highest yielding form of marketing that exists. That is still the case today, no matter what tools are out there, no matter how much social media, how many ads, how many things are online, the things that are popping up and getting on our nerves on all of our games. Word of mouth is still going to have the highest impact. So you have to make sure that you're building your customer relationships in such a way that people will give you a positive feedback and positive reviews. And this is something as simple, and I'm sure people are thinking when we're going to get into the actual strategies, it's something as simple as being nice, being courteous, having a smile on your face. You guys have heard me talk often about the fact that if I walk into to a store and people are sucking their teeth and rolling their eyes, I'm going right back out the door. I don't care how much I want what you have. I don't care how hungry I am. If it's a restaurant, I don't care if it's something I have been eyeing for 6 months and I'm like, you know what? I'm finally in a position to go ahead and get this thing. If I walk in and your attitude is poor, you're not getting my business. And that's something that we've got to get more serious about when it comes to building that customer relationship, right? We think that because we are an island and we believe that because we are a tourist destination, that people are going to shop with us no matter what. Remember earlier, I said the world is getting much, much smaller than we realize because of social media. So if you believe that you can be rude, if you believe that your team can be rude, if you believe that your team can be not helpful and that they can be unattentive to customers and they can be neglectful and dismissive. If you think you're going to be able to keep your doors open, I hate to tell you this, but it is not going to happen. I think we've all been seeing and we've been witness to financial mismanagement aside. We've been witness to a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, a lot of restaurants, a lot of hotels who are closing their doors mainly because people don't want to come there anymore. And I will tell you this, some people may say, oh, it's too expensive. People find the money for things that they enjoy. They find the money to support people that they like, businesses that they like, and things that they have a good experience in. Is a financial impact part of it? 100%. Is our economy part of it? 100%. But people find the money to do the things that make them feel good. So if you are someone and your business is something that will make people feel good, they're going to figure out a way to show up. But if they're already financially constrained and you provide a poor service or they don't feel like you're listening to them, well, they're certainly not going to come back. And they'll say, oh, well, I don't have the money right now. But you'll see them patron someone else with the money that you could have gotten had you have been building that relationship. So I'll stop right here before we get into people over software when it comes to the mindset. Anybody have any questions?
No questions at this time.
Well, it's a quiet bunch. Okay. So there are lots of different softwares out. There's a lot of different tools available. There are lots of different ways that you can begin to think about from a technological side how you want to gather and collect information. And I want everyone who's watching this to get to a place where they are not afraid of feedback and not afraid of soliciting responses from their customers. You may not get every single person to do the survey, but if you don't offer the survey, you're never going to know what people think and you're never going to know what they're trying to figure out. Market data is only going to be so good. It's only going to take you so far. And it's not always going to be applicable to the Virgin Islands. That's one thing that we always want to keep in mind. We are very unique in that we are insular. We are very unique in that we have to order a lot of things to have them here. So there's a secondary logistical layer that we have to navigate that some other people don't have to deal with. So yes, certainly try and use your market data and big data sets to begin the preliminary way in which you evaluate what kind of market you're in or you're entering into, or what kind of business you want to do, what kind of problem that you want to solve. But then you've got to really get granular and think about, how does this apply to the Virgin Islands? So before we do software, though, you need to have a people mindset. And this is going to be the recurring theme throughout this entire presentation. And I'm going to talk about this till I'm blue in the face, because again, this is where my focus is. This is where we have missed the mark. This is where we have dropped the ball. This is the gap. The gap is not technology. The gap is not the process. The gap is not your marketing plan. The gap is not your strategic plan. The gap is in how we deal with people. And for a number of reasons, I think we can all agree that by and large, people here in any kind of service capacity have very poor attitudes. And this is not everyone, but I think we've all been places, and we've all been places a number of times where it's like every time you see these people or every time you go into the establishment, somebody's got an attitude, somebody's face is twisted up, somebody's sucking their teeth, someone doesn't want to be there. So this is where we can make the greatest impact and the greatest improvement in how we create, operate, and sustain our businesses is purely in our people, both in from a leadership perspective in pouring into your people. Again, we've talked about that at length over the last couple of years that I've been doing these with the SBDC. We've been talking a lot about how you empower your team, how you pour into your team, how you deal with your direct reports, how you deal laterally with your contemporaries and your colleagues, how you deal vertically with people who are above you. And we've talked a lot about creating those positive relationships, because that's where it starts, and that's where it's going to filter out into the rest of the community, is what's happening internally. But then if you got that kind of figured out, or you're understanding how you want to make those shifts, you also have to have a focus on how are we going to address and interact with that community. So when we look at the tools, it's not about the software itself. It's not about the tablet. It's not about the application on someone's phone. It's about understanding not just the relationship, but how do you build and foster relationships? So maybe some of you are not in a place where you have a large customer base. So I want to ask you a couple of things. First one being, what do you think you can do? And you can write these things down. What do you think you can do to enhance the people that already support you, strangers or friends alike? And then what would be your next step if you were trying to connect with some new individuals? And so this is part of that relationship management strategies. What am I doing correctly? But even more importantly than that, and this is the thing that we don't want to talk about, what am I doing incorrectly? What's not working? Are people not coming back to see me? Ask them. These are some things that you can do right now, is you can ask people who support you, people who come to your business, and you can say, what do you like about coming here? What do you think we could do better? Those are things that you can immediately get feedback on. And that's going to take you far beyond the tool, because the tool is going to be an extension of the relationship and the process. Hope you guys get that part. The tool is simply an extension of the relationship and the process. The tool doesn't build the business. People build the business. Your people inside your team and the people that you're dealing with, whatever your service model looks like, that is what builds the business. So the tool is going to be an extension of that. You can have all the tools in the world. As a matter of fact, there was a legislative hearing just 2 days ago about taxi cab commission and trying to give them some support from BIT, right, in terms of technological advancement. And one of the key things that came out of that conversation was the tools and the technology are great, but if you don't have the people and you don't have enough staff or you don't have the right staff, the tools don't matter. And so I always think back on all the conversations that I've had, and it was really interesting to see that come up in that setting, in that environment, because it's the truth. We have the tools. The tools are abundant. There are people who specialize in building the tools, but the tool won't work if you're not building relationships. The tool won't work if you're not trying to figure out what people need. The tool won't work if you don't have a firm grasp on what the issue is that you're trying to solve, or the problem that you're trying to figure out, the resolution that you're trying to come to. So if you don't have those things in focus, the tools aren't going to help you very much. They'll make you more efficient at doing the wrong thing. They'll make you more efficient and faster at shooting at the wrong target, but they're not going to help you get where you need to be because the focus is not on the relationship. So we want to make sure that we are building trust, and we're going to talk about that in the next slide, and getting feedback. Those are the strategies that we want to go home with for today. Is how do I build trust and how do I get feedback? There's tons of tools, again, in that exist for you to be able to get feedback from your clients, from your customers, from the people that you interact with. There's tons of tools in place, very easy tools that you can use. But you have to be willing to go out and gather that information. More importantly, you have to be willing to ask the questions. Many of us are afraid of what people are going to say. And especially in the community that can be abrasive, I know we don't really want to hear that. But at the same time, it's valuable information. Take yourself out of the equation. Don't make it personal. If you're asking a question about what can we do as a company, what can we do as a business, even what can I do as a leader, it's not personal. This is professional development. And this is one of the keys of professional development that we often avoid. And it's why we're not developing at all, because we're not willing to get information back from people. We think that we have the answer. We think that we know what people want. We think that we know that what motivates them. We believe that we know exactly what kind of service that they want, what that model looks like. And we've been missing the mark and wondering how come things aren't working, because we're unwilling to get that information from the people that we're interacting with. So I want to continue to encourage you all to ask the question next time that you're with anyone and they're buying a product, and this is someone that you've seen more than once. Certainly ask them, what do you like about this? What do you like about us? You know, if it's someone who's been there for the first time, how'd you hear about us? Did someone tell you, or we just walked in? Oh, cool. Well, you just walked in. What drove you to come inside? You know, what motivated you to step into this store when there's, 100 other stores you go to? However you want to frame the question. But picking your customer brain a little bit is really going to help give you a lot of insight.
We have questions.
Oh, great. Fire away.
Okay. I've noticed that my local residential support is growing steadily. While I haven't yet secured any government contracts, I'd like to understand how I can better translate that local momentum into government contracting success.
Great question. The government is a different entity altogether. And what you'll want to do with the government is be able to have a very thorough plan proposal in place for them to review. That's for the government. It's more important that they feel confident that you know what you're doing, quote unquote, than to have a long and successful customer base, if that makes sense. They may look and see, is this person, getting traction? Are they doing things? But for the government, most of the time, it's really making sure that you can answer their questions and make them feel comfortable. So what I would do is continue to leverage the growth that you're seeing and start to gather the data we've been talking about so that you can turn that into a narrative that's compelling for attracting those government contracts, because they're mostly very technical. And what they want to know is that if we are going to work with you, are you going to be able to deliver? And the way that you can feel more confident in the language, the verbiage, and the information that you provide them is in collecting that information from the various ways that I'm hoping that you're already doing that. So if you're getting your sales data, if you're getting your participant or attendee data, or people who are coming in and out, your traffic data, if you're getting data from people who are giving you their verbal feedback, you're getting data from written feedback, whether it's through surveys or different types of feedback loops, you compile all that, and that's how you build a narrative that says, listen, I've been doing this for X number of years, and I've done this much growth over this much time. These are what people are saying about me. I believe that this is the next logical step for my business. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that. And we have one more. Which component of the customer relationship management has the most impact on customer loyalty?
This is going to sound very elementary. The most impact for your customer relationship management in terms of the strategy to employ is purely being pleasant. You'll find that when people like interacting with you, they will overlook you not being knowledgeable. They will overlook you having to go back and find answers to their questions. They will overlook you not having what they're looking for. They will overlook, delays in the logistics and the shipping. So the biggest element, and I know, again, this is going to sound elementary, but this is where we have to be the most focused. You don't have to be, and I'll say this, I know people who are brilliant, who are abrasive. Their information is right, but no one wants to hear them because of how their approach is. And they know what they're talking about. They've got the experience and education to back it up, but they're so abrasive and they're so rude and almost condescending when they speak. People don't want to hear them. So you'll find that you don't have to know everything. You don't have to have all the answers, but as long as you're pleasant and as long as you're willing to listen and willing to try and find the solution, that's what's going to drive those repeat customers. Because a customer will say, you know what, they didn't get it right the first time, but they were super nice, and I'm gonna give them another shot. Or, you know what, it was a delay, and I understand it wasn't their problem and it wasn't their issue in terms of something that they did directly. You know what, that's okay. We're gonna keep on coming back to them because they're always super nice. They're always very pleasant. They're always very helpful. Hope that answers your question.
Thank
I
you.
see some other stuff going on there. Is that more questions?
That's thanks for answering the first set of questions.
Okay.
Yeah, they both said thank you.
No problem. My pleasure. My pleasure. So, this is a tool question, and this is for you all. Again, you don't have to put this in the chat, but just be thinking about, we've been talking about the relationship aspect, but tools do exist. So if you are using a tool, I want you to think about what that is you're using, and how that's being delivered to your customers. Maybe people are signing up or pushing a button when they come into your store. Maybe you're sending something out after the fact. Just be thinking about what you're using. And the reason that that's important is because you want to think about the fact that if the tool is the extension, does the tool capture not only the information that I want, but does the tool reflect the overall vision, mission, and purpose of my organization or my company, right? So if I'm using a tool, does that, when people open that tool or they open that app, they feel like they're becoming part of the culture and the family and the dynamic of your organization? Or do they feel like they're being, I don't want to say battered, but are they just being screened for information, right? People feel that way. They don't want to feel like, oh, you're trying to get my information so you can sell it. You don't really care about me. That's a lot of how we think. We want to feel like we are valued. It doesn't matter how minuscule we are in the grand scheme of the economy. I'll use this scenario. Social media is a very powerful tool. One of the things that I've noticed is in like my fashion side of my professional career and, showcasing different brands and some different things is I have found that a simple comment on a post from the brand goes a long way in me coming back to that brand. They may not say anything of it's not a personal comment like, oh, we really like what you're doing. It may just be great look, thumbs up. And I'm like, man, they took time out to see little old me posting about their boots or about their suits. That makes me feel good. I'm going to go back and I'm going to buy some more stuff from them. So you got to make sure that when you are sending out whatever tool, whatever application, whatever you're using, that it doesn't feel disingenuous, that it feels like, hey, we really want to know what it is that you think about us. Now, you have to determine how you make that look and how you make that feel. But the underlying thing is that you want people to feel like they matter and that they have a stake in the overall success of your organization or your business. Which brings us to the next part, building trust. Being consistent is a deal breaker or a deal maker. Earlier, I talked about the fact that we've all been places where almost every time you go in there, someone's got an attitude. That's a deal breaker. Eventually, that business is not going to be able to operate unless they change the entire culture, because it may not be the same person, but it may be that every time you go in, no matter who's working in this environment, someone has an attitude, someone's upset, someone's angry. And you start to wonder, why am I coming in here? People don't even like working here. What's happening that I'm not seeing? And it makes you start to question whether or not you want to continue to service or patron that business. So the consistency in being poorly managed, operated, and having poor customer service and poor customer interaction will yield poor results. The converse side of that is if you are consistent in being pleasant, if you are consistent in being helpful, if you are consistent in showing up, if you are consistent in being on time, these are a lot of soft skills. Matter of fact, let me pause. I was at a induction for FBLA at UVI. And one of the things the keynote speaker spoke about, excuse me, was the fact that when she was talking to businesses, what was being relayed to her was they're having to fire people because they lack the soft skills. These things that we're discussing today, those soft skills, being nice, being on time, being properly dressed, being able to interact with people, having manners, having etiquette, all the soft skills that we're discussing today, in the real world, these are happening right now. Businesses are firing people because they lack them. So this is not just our experience or me recalling something that I've seen. These are also experiences that other professionals are witnessing, and they're having these conversations with business owners and with large organizations. And these people are saying, we need people, but we're not getting the quality of people that we need to be able to build our business and to build our brand and to represent our brand. So back to that question about one of the key components is you've got to be consistent about being that pleasant person, about having those soft skills, about being helpful. Remember this, every one of us, no matter where you work, no matter what you do, everything that we do is a service. We provide some service to someone, and we exist because there is a need. We exist because there is a service. And we have to make sure that we are delivering that service, that we are addressing that need with the highest level of professionalism and the highest level of care and empathy and compassion as possible. So we want to make sure that we are consistent in being that kind of person. I spoke about this in the customer service and in one of my leaderships previously, that when I first started working here, people thought I was weird because I came in every day and I would stop and I'd greet everybody and I was smiling. I told everybody good morning and I made sure I spoke to every single person in this office before I got my day started. And what was interesting is that even though people found it to be a little bit odd, the one time that I didn't do that, everybody came to my door and was like, hey, what's going on? You didn't tell me good morning. So you can see that I established something that people and that consistency built a reputation, but also it changed the atmosphere of the office, and it changed how we interacted with each other. So the one time that I was a little preoccupied, people were like, "Hey, what's going on here? This is not normal." And so if you build that and you continue to be consistent, this is how you get people to continue to come back. And again, this is how people will overlook things that have maybe have inconvenienced them, or maybe it's not exactly what they had expected, but they'll overlook it. They'll expect it to be remedied, of course. We're not saying that you can't continue to do that, but they'll overlook it because you're pleasant and helpful and you're understanding and compassionate. A lot of that goes a long way. So it's those skills are incredibly important in how we continue to move the needle and to address and support all the things that we're doing as business owners, as entrepreneurs, and as people who are providing a service to our community. So we talked about this briefly. Feedback. I talk about this in a lot of leadership conversations. You've got to be willing to get feedback. Now, the mechanism, the delivery model, the way that you solicit that feedback is going to be different based on several different factors, but you have to be willing to get it. We are in a time where the market is changing so rapidly, that technology is changing so rapidly, that the economy is changing so rapidly. If you aren't, again, keeping a pulse of what's happening, you're going to be behind the curve. And this is not just about technological advancement. I was reading an article just yesterday about Craigslist, and it talked about the fact that Craigslist never bought into the glitz and glamour of web design and having all this functionality and all these features. It was bare bones. You click on this, you go here, you read that, you look at these pictures, and you make a decision. $700 million a year organization with 60 employees on a bare bones model. The reason I bring that up is because it's not always going to be about the technology. So when we talk about being left behind, we're not just talking about technological advancement, because Craigslist is a prime example of someone who stayed true to what they did, who kept it basic, who kept it simple, who provided a service, and it did very well over 20 years. So it's important to recognize that it was an extension. The website was simply an extension, right? The tool was an extension of the personality, the extension of the culture and the ideology of a person who said, I see a need, let's fill that need. And let's just stay true to filling the need. Let's not bombard them with all kinds of other stuff. Let's just keep fulfilling the need. And they were very lucrative and very successful. So when you invite that feedback, it's because you want to make sure that you are fulfilling those needs. If you are in hospitality, feedback is critical. Feedback can make or break you, because if you're getting feedback and you're not making an adjustment, the next thing they're going to do is go on social media. The next thing they're going to do is go on TripAdvisor. The next thing they're going to do is go on Kayak or any of these other websites, and they're going to give you a bad review. And enough of those put you in a very difficult position to recover from. And here in a small community, enough bad press, enough bad reviews will get your door shut. And you won't be able to recover from that, at least in that particular business model. You may have to go and pivot and do something completely different. But bear in mind, in a small community, you are still tied to poor reviews. So it's going to be equally hard to get into a different market, because your name's still tied to some things that didn't go very well that could have been remedied and rectified. So just remember about the long-term ramifications of not getting the feedback, of not paying attention, of not being helpful, being courteous. All those things will follow you, and you have a hard time fixing and adjusting and getting people's perception of you to change as a business owner or entrepreneur. Having a failing business is one thing, but having a business where people don't like dealing with you, that's difficult to recover from. So we want to make sure that we understand in customer relationship management that it is the relationship management part that is the most important. Manage your relationships and everything else will follow suit. Your business can fail, but if you're managing relationships, people are going to want to invest. People are going to want to work with you on other things. They're going to want to collaborate in other ways. They're going to open doors for other opportunities. If you are terrible to work with and horrible to work for, your doors become very, very few and very difficult to open. So remember that it is about managing the relationship. That is the most important thing. And as you see here, it says that commitment to improvement. You have to improve. This is a perpetual activity. Right? And several of the other ones we've talked about that continuous improvement loop. And you improve something, you deploy it, you review it, you make the adjustment, and then you do it again. And this is what you do, and you continue to do that. The same thing holds true for relationships. If you have to adjust and work with someone, and you now start to understand who they are, what they need, what they're looking for, great. Let me address that, and then we continue to build this relationship. Does anybody have any questions before we go into communication?
No questions at this time.
So in all this relationship management and relationship building, what is the most important part? Well, that is going to be communication. And we'll be talking more about communication in an upcoming presentation. We talked about this before. So my first one was about effective communication. And this is something that we talk about extensively across all of the interactions that I have and the presentations that I have opportunity to give is the importance of communication. So I've been talking about this already, and we've been kind of elaborating on it, but it's having, right, those matters, the being empathetic, being compassionate, being caring. That's what matters. This is the foundational portion of the relationship management. These are relationship management skills, if you will, is effective communication. It's not about being condescending and, acting like you can get another customer. We've been in places where people act like, oh, I don't need you. You don't have to buy my stuff. You don't have to come to my store. Enough of those people will eventually tell everybody that they shouldn't be in your store because you told them that. So they're going to go tell everybody else that. And before you know it, you're wondering why you don't have sales, you don't have traffic, or you don't have support. So you have to make sure that you are warm and empathetic. Now, I want to pause here because I recognize that there are difficult customers and there are difficult people, and you want to say certain things. I know that those things exist. You have clients that are difficult, and you have to remember that even if that's a one-off situation, you are having your reputation, your brand is going to be in the crosshair, so to speak. So you have to maintain your composure. You have to maintain your ability to think calmly, to think through solutions, and to try and find a resolution to whatever's happening. So some people won't let you do that. Some people actually get offended because you're not excited or hype, or say if you're calm and you're trying to say, okay, well, how can we figure it out? And they're just continuing to get more and more aggravated because you're not getting aggravated. Some people just want to push your buttons too. So remember that part of this is going to be conflict resolution. That's a whole other conversation. But conflict management, conflict resolution, crisis resolution, all those things are super important skills to learn. There are tons of people who specialize in that. I study under people who specialize in that. So, it's important to understand that there's going to be internal conflict inside your organization. There's external conflict between your organization and other organizations, or your organization and the public. So managing those is going to be important. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to try and maintain that compassion, that empathy, being able to try and understand and figure out, okay, what can we do? How can we support? How can we help? That goes a long way in customer relationships, because some people, and what you'll find is that about 80% of people who have a complaint really just want to be heard. A lot of people don't necessarily want the fix. They just want to know that you listen and that you care. And you might be thinking that's a little bit weird, but it's actually much more prevalent than you realize. Most people are okay with something not working, or they're okay with a shipment not making it, or they're okay with something being delayed. What they're not okay with is that unexpected inconvenience and then dealing with someone who doesn't care. Is what exacerbates the problem. So if you can be helpful, if you can be warm, if you can be understanding, if you can be trying to figure out how we can come to a solution, again, they'll likely overlook the inconvenience of the situation and they'll likely come back. But if you are difficult and you don't want to be bothered and you're sucking your teeth and you're rolling your eyes and you're walking off and you don't care, well, that you're setting yourself up for a decline in revenue. You're setting yourself up for a decline in traffic. You're setting yourself up for a decline in your overall return on investment. So let's bear in mind that the most critical part of this is you and how you deal with people. So tailoring your communication to individual needs is not just about knowing your audience. It's also about knowing the customers to the point where when you are interacting with them, again, they feel like you know them. And we should. Let's think about this. Your favorite watering hole, as I call them, right? Your favorite place to go and have an adult beverage or to unwind. One of the things that you like the most about that place is that you know the people that are behind the bar or the staff, right? They know who you are. They know what you like. They have your beverage for you, right? They may ask something about your personal life that you've maybe disclosed already, but the most important thing is that you don't have to go in and give a bunch of instructions. Same concept. When you're dealing with people, as best you can, learn about them so that, especially if you're going to be building repeat customers and you're going to be building this loyal customer base, then you should know a little bit about what people have going on, ask about their children if you know. I mean, again, this is a small community, keeping this VI centric. This is a small community. We all know each other. We know each other's kids. We're teaching each other's kids, or we're seeing each other's, partners. And I mean, we're seeing everybody all the time. So there's no reason to not know something about someone or ask something about someone or being able to provide a solution that meets their needs in particular. So again, as you get into large scale operations, this is obviously not practical. You can't address every single person's needs, but you can, by and large, compartmentalize them into certain types of needs and then address the overall scope of that need in general, right? That's a different way of looking at that when you look about large scale operations, right? You can't be all things to all people, but you can categorize them and say, okay, most people like this, most people need that, most people need this other thing. So we can address them in these three buckets, if you will, these three compartments, and that will deal with the majority of the things that we're seeing in terms of perhaps there are complaints or claims, right? But this is how you enhance that customer loyalty, is to make them feel as though they matter to you. I know it's not rocket science. I know it sounds fundamental, and I know it sounds like, oh, that's super simple, but how often do we sit in places and we wonder why people can't do this, right? We have to begin to be that example and to operate our environments, whether you're over a department, whether you're in a department, whether you're over a business, whether you're an entrepreneur launching a business, whether you're providing a service or whatnot. This is how we have to begin that journey to excellence. And speaking of journeys, we're going to get into journey mapping as a tool. But does anybody have any questions before we get into that?
We are all ears, no questions.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you guys again. We're almost finished here. So journey mapping, or the customer's journey, is a way, and this is an actual tool that you can look at, and you can just simply write this as a list. It doesn't have to be a map. It doesn't have to be very fancy, but you can just write down what are the steps that lead a customer to a purchase, and then what would be the steps in theory to get them back. That's all this is. If you envision and you are building your business and you say, I offer this, what's going to get them there? And then what are the actual steps? They come in, they find what? We'll use retail again. I have to make sure I have their right size. I have to make sure it's the color they're looking for, perhaps. I have to make sure that the price is reasonable based on economic factors, right? How easy is it for them to check out? Am I cash only? That's a problem for most people, especially if they're tourists, right? I gotta make sure I offer multiple methods of payment. Okay, is it tap, or they have to actually use their card? All these things you look at, okay, what is the customer's journey to satisfaction? You determine that journey because you're the one person providing the service. You're the person providing the product. So you're going to determine what the journey is. Your job is to also look for possible pitfalls in that pathway. What if I look at it after I laid it out, what am I missing? What would be something that would make somebody not come back and buy again? What is something that would make them not enjoy the experience, right? And you write those things down, and then you find what's called a mitigation strategy. So here we talk a lot about risk factors and mitigations to risk. So that's literally just looking at what are the potential areas where something bad could happen. And if it were to happen, how would we fix it? How do we address it, right? You start thinking about that proactively. So it's the same concept from the dealing with a customer standpoint. What are the things that would make a customer not come back or give me bad feedback? How do I make sure those things don't happen? And that's how you begin to visualize the journey for your customer. And then you simply expand that based on whatever things that you're offering. But that's the framework and the layout. You simply just look at each and every step from the moment you have inventory in and it's available all the way through to a purchase. And then how do you bring that person back to do it again and make sure that it's repeatable and it's enjoyable and it's a pleasant experience for them. So they'll continue to do that. And then of course the hope is that they'll tell their friends, and then you get new business. But it starts with repeat business.
And we have a question.
Sure.
How can businesses personalize their approach to customer care without advanced CRM software or large budgets?
Great question. Well, I guess the first thing would be how large of an operation is it? Because yeah, you certainly wouldn't, if it's, hundreds of thousands of people, or even tens of thousands of people, or thousands of people for that matter, you may need the software as a tool. But remember, the software is just that, it's a tool. So if we want to take tools out of the equation, it would simply be learning the customers. Again, you could get the feedback by sending out the surveys or a review, or it maybe they're already reviewing. If you say, hey, review us on whatever platform you're on, Facebook, give us a review on TripAdvisor. Make sure you're going back and reading them. Sometimes we ask for that stuff and we never go back and look at it. And then you'll have a person, and there's no doubt that you'll have a person who will come in and be like, you know what? The last time I was here, I had this exact same problem, and I wrote about it. I guess no one's reading the comments, right? They'll say that. So whatever you employ in terms of data gathering, that's how you start making that adjustment. It doesn't have to be on the scale of using your full CRM or other large scale systems. We have to kind of get a little bit deeper into that, because I have to have a greater understanding of what it is that you all are doing and the scale at which you're operating. So we could tailor that a little bit more, but to deconstruct it down, it would just be like to gather your information to make sure that you are reading it and then figuring out how to apply what people are saying. That's the fundamental way that you continue to enhance that personalization. Again, you can't be all things to all people. So one thing that I'll give you an example. Just recently, we had some trainings, and what I did was I asked everyone to, as they register, to talk about what they would like to learn going forward. Everybody's answers were a little bit different, but they fell under some similar categories. So what I did was I compartmentalized them into, 6 different categories, and each category had some sub information based on what they said. So the way it will work going forward is the people who were interested in certain things that fall under category A, when we introduce the training for category A, those people will be contacted and say, hey, you mentioned this falls under this particular training offering. it'll be available if you'd like to take it. Right. So it's not about personalization to the granular scale of the individual, especially if you're a large operation. It's about personalization to the majority of the interest, response, or complaints that you have. Hope that answers your question.
I think it does. And for that additional question, I'll answer it at a later time.
Okay. So we were talking about the journey. This goes a little bit further into it, just identifying things that create loyalty. So this is about the second half. Once that person has concluded the purchase or has received the service, how do you get them back in the door, right? So you identify areas of either improvement or opportunities to engage them multiple times going forward. And with that, that moves us right into referrals and advocates. And so getting people, this goes back to being word of mouth, getting people to be your advertising team by virtue of having good experiences is going to be a monumental way to create repeat business and to gain new business. Right? You want to empower customer recommendation. So we've been talking about this. These are just a couple of slides that reiterate that. The word of mouth happens when you give people a great experience, and that it's moderately personalized, it's more empathetic and compassionate and understanding than anything, and that you encourage them. So we talk about empower customer recommendations. We encourage them to go out and tell people about their positive experiences. You'd be surprised that some people may feel a little bit uncomfortable about sharing even good experiences. So typically what I have found is that when you tell somebody, hey, make sure you go out and tell someone, they've probably thought about it, but they weren't going to say anything. But the moment you're like, hey, why don't you let everybody know about us? They'll be like, you know what? I probably should. Simply because you asked, right? So just like you would ask for feedback, you can also say, hey, make sure, are you following us on social media? Are you, checking us out on TikTok, whatever. And they'll be like, hey, you know what? Let me pull it up right now. Oh, you know what? I like this. Let me share this with all my friends. Or simply because now you follow it and we know how social media works, people start following and tapping in. And now you've got more and more people being interested in what you do. So empower those people to share positive experiences, because we are all quick to share poor ones, but we don't share the good ones as much unless there's something that's just mind blowing. But we want to encourage them to showcase the everyday interactions. Hey, you know what? Every single time that I come in here, everybody is smiling, everybody is nice, everybody is helpful. I recommend coming in and checking this place out simply because you're consistent. You talked about that. So you empower them to do that by being consistent, but also just by asking. So we don't have to do this, but think about a time where you were able to gain referrals, or maybe not even for your business. Think about a time when you referred someone to someone else, and what made you do that? What made you say, you know what, I'm going to tell my friends about this experience. In a positive way. I'm going to put this out on social media. I'm going to make sure that I give them a great review, right? What made you do that? And then think about how you can harness that for yourself. You'll have to tinker with it a little bit. You'll have to modify it some, of course, but then you'll be able to make that culture and that ideology, that methodology stick to where you'll be someone that people are referring. That's what you want to see, that people are referring you to other people. So think about a time when you were the person who was referring someone else, or you were referring a business, or you were referring a website, or you were referring an organization. And again, if you have notepads with you, you write all this stuff down, we can refer back to it. But this is just to have you thinking about what are the things that make good customer relationships. Right? Not so much about the management part, but what just develops a good relationship. What were the things that made that a pleasant experience? What were the things that really had you thinking, you know what, I would definitely come back here. I'll tell you this, I've been to restaurants where the food wasn't even as good as I had expected, but the service was so great that I would come back and give the food another shot. Again, you'll overlook certain things, but if the food is poor and the service is bad, how many of us are going back? Probably not many. So there's things that the relationship aspect can transcend and carry you through, even when the product or the service still needs a little bit of tweaking. Anybody have any questions here?
Yes.
Sure.
What are some common mistakes that companies make that cause them to lose loyal customers? What is one recovery strategy to one of those common mistakes?
One of the most common mistakes is simply not listening. I don't know if you guys have seen, who is it? KFC is a good example. There was a time where KFC, they had like the best potato wedges of potato wedges, right? And they took them off the menu for some time. I don't know if you guys have seen the ads lately, but the ad opens with, "You guys said it, we listened, they're back." And you can see the influx just from social media. You can see the influx of people who are going back down to that restaurant because the potato wedges are back. So one of the major things that companies don't do is they make unilateral decisions without the data or even interpreting the data that they're collecting from their customer base. And so if you're not listening to your customers don't feel valued. Now, again, you can't do everything, but if you're seeing an underlying theme or a main concept, and everyone's, 8%, 9%, 60% of the people are talking about this issue, you need to look at that issue and figure out how you address it. Now, similar to the KFC example, and we'll talk about this in a minute, be transparent about the fact that you dropped the ball in making that decision and that you're correcting it, and then correct it, of course. So that's one of the main ones that I see people lose customers over, is not listening to their customers, and then not going back and bringing something back that maybe people really like, right? We've heard the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it. So sometimes in an effort to always attract new customers, we end up losing, right, that loyal customer base, because we're trying to go beyond our scope, go beyond our means or our grasp, and get more people, not realizing that we've been sustained by those people who love the potato wedges, for example. So I hope that answers your question. That's just one, of course, but that's the biggest one that I see that causes people to lose interest in a company, is when they have their favorite item, their favorite tool, their favorite method or a payment or whatever. There's something that they really, really like about a company or an organization. And when that thing goes away, that becomes a problem for a lot of people. And sometimes you have to just bite the bullet, so to speak, and bring that thing back to get those customers back. And something too that people don't realize is that when you can regain customers because you listen to them, you're also going to gain new customers, because they're going to go out and say, "Hey, you know what? These guys did something that I didn't like, and then they fixed it." And that's going to generate interest for a whole new set of. So you're actually going to get that new customer base that you were trying so hard to capture just by listening to the customers that you already have. Hope that answers that question.
Thank you for the.
All right, so we've mentioned tools. The question's been asked about tools. I already said in the beginning, I'm not going to actually recommend any tools in particular, any software in particular, but I will tell you here what to look for. Right? These are the things that, regardless of the scale, regardless of where you are, these are things you should be looking for when you start talking about like an actual tool, a software, an equipment, application, etc. It's got to be easy for you to use, you as the person who's going to be launching and interacting with that. It's got to be easy for you to use. That's number one. If it's too cumbersome, if it's too complicated, if you don't understand it, you're not going to use it. Guess what? It's not effective. Of course, everything is now on a subscription basis for the most part. Long gone are the days where you can buy a software and you own that software in perpetuity, right? So you're going to have to look at a subscription that fits your business in terms of its financial position, as well as the gain, right? The return on investment. If I put this X number of money per month into this software, what will it gain me? And perhaps it'll put me in a position to be able to offer a more expanded subscription, or even, other licenses or what have you. So make sure that you can afford what you're looking for in terms of a tool, and that's going to give you the return you're looking for. Now, with the return, that's that customer interaction. You want to make sure that you can modify and customize the information that you want to track so that it's beneficial to you. Right? So some people offer what we call off-the-shelf or out-of-the-box solutions, but you can't really make any changes to them. And that doesn't help you if you have a very unique business or a unique service or something that's unique to you, or even just unique information that you want to gather that may be a little bit unconventional. So you have to make sure that you can make those changes with whatever tool you're using, because otherwise you're just capturing data for data's sake, but it's not turning into information, right? Data is just the accumulation of facts, figures, and events, right? Information is when you can take all of that and turn it into something useful. So if you're just gathering data for data's sake, then you're not really utilizing that for what it's intended for, and you're probably wasting your money. And you're wasting your time because now you've invested time into learning a system that you're not even going to use properly or can't function the way that you need to. So make sure it's easy to use, make sure you can afford it, and make sure it offers the things that you need in terms of the information that you want to track and gather. And so when you look at that, when you start with one, make sure it's simple. Make sure that you, and if more than one person is using it, we talked about it being ease of use. Make sure that it's not anything that takes, multiple training sessions and an advanced degree to operate. We don't want that. That's not going to help you any. That's too much time doing something that it would benefit you in the long run, but you're going to lose a lot trying to get up to speed on that. It's also very costly as well. So bear that in mind. And then just make sure that you can put that data in a standardized way so that it can be looked at, it can be analyzed, and it can be used. Right? We don't want something this information is all over the place all the time. So I'm a big fan of templates. I think most of us are a big fan of templates. I'm a big fan of standardization. So once you have something that's standardized, this is how it looks. And when you get into the technological aspect of it, having standardized documents, naming convention, and locations allows you to pull information much more frequently, with much greater ease and much higher quality and reliability. So all those things matter as you get into scaling those models. And again, the practical implementation. Does it work for you? Does it work for you? That's the most important part. Many of us, and we see this all the time, not just from an IT standpoint, but I've seen this from the nonprofit side, especially working with a lot of nonprofits, is they want to go out and get the latest and greatest whatever. And then they're like, what do we do with it? Well, did you think about that before you went out and purchased it? What was your intended use? What was the desired outcome? Right? We have a tendency to not do enough of the planning, analyzing, and strategizing on the front end. Now, of course, there's the extreme of that where you do it to the point where you don't move at all, right? That paralysis by analysis. But we have to at least have some sort of idea, plan, and strategy on what we're trying to do. What is the desired outcome? What are we trying to accomplish before we go out and start buying a bunch of tools? Right. So that's no matter what you do in your professional career, no matter what area or sector you operate in, that holds true. Have a plan, know your desired outcome, know what you're trying to accomplish before you go out and get the tool, because most of the time you're going to end up wasting money on a tool that's not going to work for what you need. Any questions on that?
No questions.
No questions. All right. So we talked about this when the question was asked regarding the things that will cause someone to lose interest or to lose your customer base. So one thing that we as business owners don't want to be, and we've talked about this in a leadership capacity as well, is transparent. And being consistent with being transparent, offering the information, right? Of course, we're not saying, your trade secrets. We're not talking about proprietary information or classified information. Of course, we're not saying those things. What we're saying is if something is not functioning properly, let people know. If there's going to be an issue, let people know that. If there's going to be a change in your service model, let people know that. Don't just have them walk in one day and everything's different. And I will say this for me personally, that is a pet peeve. If I walk in somewhere and there was no communication that everything's going to be different, that everything's that I'm going to be dealing with different type of people, a different service model, a different methodology, a different operating model, like that is a major problem. Not that it's because it's changed, but because it wasn't communicated. It was unexpected. So we want to make sure that we are doing the same thing, right? Be honest, give your customers reassurance. And sometimes it's okay to over communicate. Of course, you leave out your proprietary, your strategic stuff, your classified stuff, but it's okay to over communicate. People would rather know than be surprised. That's another way. So going back to the KFC example, no one knew that they were going to remove the potato wedges. People walked in one day and was like, what do you mean you don't have potato wedges anymore? And people walked out because that's what they came for. Yes, the chicken is great. Yes, they had all these other sandwiches and things they were offering, but it was the potato wedges as the side that was like the premier side for a KFC meal. And they never communicated that that was going anywhere. So if you do have to make a change and it is a necessary change, communicate that. I'll take it a step further. Communicate that with your team. One thing that is also a pet peeve of mine is unilateral decisions that involve other members of your team, and then those members get blindsided by it. If you're in a leadership position, if you're running the organization, if you're running the company, if this is your baby and you're trying to bring it up online or you're trying to expand it and you've got to make a hard decision, or maybe it's not a hard decision, but it's a necessary one that's going to change the way you operate, you have a responsibility to communicate that to your team and then to the public. Okay. I think we all are pretty well fed up about finding stuff out on social media, finding it out secondhand, finding it out when we walk in. We talk about transparency all the time in multiple ways and myriad capacities. And we're seeing that it is something that people want to have. They want to know, they want to see what's going on. So it behooves us to be transparent, especially if you're having issues. If there's some difficult things that are going on, or some changes have to be made, or maybe there's a temporary closure or a shift or a shuttering of your operations, your logistics, whatever it looks like, your service model, then communicate that to people so they can be prepared for that. Because some people factor you as a business or you as a service into their schedule. They factor you into their budget. They factor you into their routine. You have to be just mindful, right? It's not a responsibility to make sure that, you know all this about everybody, but just bear in mind that there are people who are factoring you or your service or whatever it is into some aspect of their lives. And so it's okay to communicate with them if that's going to be changing, and what information you have available to you at the time is better than no information at all. Bear that in mind. We see that in politics all the time. We'll know more as the situation unfolds. Okay, great. At least I know something. Same thing holds true in business. Tell them something until you have more information to tell them. This goes back to the importance of consistency. You don't want things to be happening all the time with your organization, but good and bad, communicate that. Be consistent with your communication, be consistent with how you operate, be consistent with being pleasant, be consistent with being passionate, be consistent with communicating, with listening, and with applying what you learn. That's how you get your sustained service. And that's how it becomes something that will continue to grow your business, continue to expand and to gain those new customers, right? Because when you forego your loyal customers for the sake of new customers, you end up with a customer. And I'll leave you guys with that. This is my final thought. I always put these at the end. Right? We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. In Churchill, remember, we are all here to provide a service of some sort. And to give real service, you must add something which cannot be bought or measured with money, and that is sincerity and integrity. Remember that the tools are simply an extension of the ethos of your organization. And customer service shouldn't just be a department, it should be the entire company. And of course, my favorite is a dream without action is just a wish. So for all you all who are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, take the necessary steps to build that dream and to go forward and pursue it. But remember that these things that we're talking about are just aspects of how you become successful at whatever endeavor that you undertake. So thank you guys again so much. Just my contact information on the screen here. I am available to do in-person workshops. I talk about of different subjects when it comes to business or leadership, communication. So reach out if you want to have a discovery call about what I can bring to your team or your organization or your agency. And with that, I will turn it back over to Miss Industrious. Thank you.
All righty. So if you do have questions, you can continue to place those in the chat. And so do we have that slide with the SBDC's contact information? Oh, there we go. All righty. So I'd just like to say the VI SBDC has so much more in store for you as VI small businesses. You can visit our website at www.visbdc.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe to the VI SBDC YouTube channel for new uploads of our webinars. We encourage you to download the VI SBDC app on your mobile device from the appropriate app store. And so let me just give a highlight of some of the upcoming trainings that we have. So I'll go ahead and interrupt your sharing. And I'll share my screen and I'll take you straight to the VI SBDC YouTube. Correct. The VI SBDC training portal. And I just want to show everyone how to navigate and they can see those pre-recorded webinars. So when you go to the portal, you can go down to the event type and select on demand, search, and therefore you should be able to see everything that has passed that you can watch at your leisure. So go ahead and sign up. You will receive the recording link as well as the passcode. And you can email us if you need any additional meeting materials, like a copy of the presentation, and the presenter's contact information is going to be within the recording. So let me take you to a few events that we have coming up. Alrighty, so we just executed our customer service webinar by our presenter, Mr. Lanley Shazar. And so coming up on November 12th, the Agriculture Business Center, they're going to be doing an income statement and cash flow workshop. Their events are usually in the evening. And so they have part 2 happening on November 13th. We want to highlight that we are hosting a webinar in collaboration with the USPTO. They're going to be presenting on Intellectual Property 101 and Patent Basics. And then we have a representative from Popular, Vice President Monique Richards. She's going to be focusing on USVI business banking concepts, strategies, and best practices. Our Agriculture Business Center continues to host sessions. On November 17th, they're going to be focusing on financial ratios and financial scorecard. And then they have part 2 on the 18th. And we want to highlight, we have another accounting specified webinar coming up with our VI SBDC advisor, Ms. Rael Reddick. So on November 19th, she's going to be talking about analyzing financial statements, a step-by-step guide for non-accountants. And we have Mr. Shazar coming back on November 20th. He's going to be presenting Connect and Grow, Effective Business Communication in a Digital Age. And for the final highlight today, I want persons to realize that we have on December 12th, VI SBDC advisor, Mr. Daryl Edwards. He's going to be focusing on Blueprint for Success, a practical guide to writing a business plan. So that's a few of the events I wanted to highlight today for you guys to go ahead and sign up. So we have events that carry us all the way to December. And so I stopped sharing my screen so I can go back and catch up on the comments. Thank you. Excellent presentation. The insights were clear, engaging, and truly highlighted the importance of building lasting relationships with our customers. Thank you, Mr. Shazar. Awesome presentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the information. Great presentation. Here's your information again. Everyone, we got ahead of that comment. Please share Mr. Shazar's information again, please. Bravo, great presentation with timely and relevant information, and the slides are clear. So I guess we don't have any more questions, just kudos and comments. So I think it's safe to sign off. So on behalf of the VISBDC, Mr. Shazar, it's always a pleasure collaborating with you on initiatives as such. So we thank you for your time. And on behalf of the entire VISBDC network, to everyone in the audience, we thank you for your time and attendance, and we do wish you a productive rest of day. So let me hand it back over, Mr. Shazar. You have any final comments or takeaways?
I just want to thank everybody for your comments and thank you all so much for being here. Yes, Ms. Industrious, it's always a pleasure collaborating with you guys, and I look forward to this next one on effective communication. So I hope to see you everyone back. And again, my contact information is on the screen. So if you're interested in having different type of session or discovery call, please reach out and we can make that happen. So thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week.
All righty then. Bye, everyone.